Hello and welcome back to Those About to Cry, the unofficial Those About to Die podcast. Hosted. I'm sorry, I can't. I need time. I'm John Stark from HackMovieGuy.com. I hope that was funny because I rarely ever am funny. But I'm a blind film critic, and this is Those About to Die. I couldn't resist Those About to Cry. I also thought about Those About to Fly, but I didn't know how I was going to do that on camera. Those About to Sigh, those about, you know what I mean? Those about to do pretty much anything that rhymes with die. So this series is now on Peacock, and it has audio description by Deluxe, narrated by William Michael Redman. And I was very enthusiastic to find out that I actually got the narration information because Peacock usually pushes me into the next episode. But for some reason, it let me watch the whole credits after episode 1, which I thought was very weird. It never does that. I guess they didn't put there's probably like a little marker in there that triggers the next episode. And at least when I saw it on the day that it came out, it didn't have a little next episode marker. I was like, okay, well, I'm fine. Cool, let's do it. So I actually know who did this. And for my blind audience out there, the joke at the beginning was I was holding a box of Kleenex for that. It's a lame joke. It's not that funny. I've got a black hat on, black sunglasses, and I'm wearing a Grogu shirt from Star Wars. I think I am anyway. I think I'm wearing clothing. I'm never really sure. So, Those About to Die is the new Sword and Sandals series at Peacock, and I'm going to have a completely different reaction to this than virtually the internet. So we're going to just split off. I'm going to let the internet go and have its fun elsewhere. This is where being a blind film critic, this is the kind of thing where people should send me shit. Like, they should really, like, occasionally, they should be like, where's that blind film critic at? We really need a good review. We really need I loved this show. However, from all of the sighted people that keep blasting the show, apparently the VFX on this are ass. So, which is the same thing I heard about Twisted Metal. Peacock doesn't like paying for VFX, apparently. So, apparently everything looks super fake in this show. It is directed by Roland Emmerich, so I had like mixed emotions about that. I was like, this either looks really good or it looks really bad. It looks one of those two things. It's either really good or oh my god. Somewhere between it's somewhere between Independence Day and Moonfall. It's just like I don't know where it is. But apparently some people are just can't get past the VFX. So that's on you. The funny thing is there is an official podcast where I have listened to. I was trying to get some context to the show too, and I did listen to some of the people, especially like the costume designer, who went into great detail. And then like I saw some dude post a review who was like, the costumes in this show suck. And I was like, man, this guy, like, he went into, like, all this detail about how he worked on all this craft and went out there and looked at, he, like, toured Rome and, like, they have a historical person who just gives them, like, historical content reference. Like, I don't know what that's called. Just gave them, this is what it would be like historically. Apparently he missed the fact that Andalusian wasn't a thing during Rome and it was something else, but they called them Andalusian horses. That was another complaint that I saw. So I don't know. This series might be a hot mess. I liked it. I like the show. What is it about? Anthony Hopkins plays the reason you're watching the show. I can't even remember the name of his character. It's so unimportant. He's in like the first couple episodes. I'm not even going to try to pretend. It's not fair to you. He is not in the whole show. This is an Anthony Hopkins. They paid him to get you. It's kind of cheap. It's the one thing, like if I had to pick one thing about the show that I thought was kind of cheap, it's like you have a cast of virtually unknown actors and Anthony Hopkins. And Anthony Hopkins, I think, dies in the third episode. I think it was the third episode. So, yeah. I just think you need to know that going in. I mean, technically, the whole show is really about the power struggle between his sons anyway, which is what he sets up. He's like, I'm old and I will be dying soon, and I have to choose which one of you to lead. So I mean, like, that's literally what the show's about from the beginning. Like, it doesn't make any bones about it. It's not like he's like a surprise. Like, it's like, oh, what happened to our father? I don't know. He just fell off his horse. It doesn't. This is not like a Game of Thrones moment too. Like, he's walking towards death from the moment we meet him. Um, so his two sons, Titus and Domitian, are up for grabs, and they both have their strengths and weaknesses. Titus seems to be the more level-headed, but his dad doesn't like the fact that he has. I guess they conquered some people, and Titus is now sleeping with their queen, and he doesn't like the optics of that. And thinks that she's just like whispering, evil into his ear. Meanwhile, Domitian is what's the upside to Domitian? I don't know, but his dad thinks there is one. So he ends up choosing Titus, which just ends up pissing off Domitian, and we get to see that play out over the course of the season. Domitian is power hungry and schemes and connives to do pretty much anything. And Titus he's kind of like aware that his brother sucks, but he also just doesn't really know what to do about it. And unfortunately, like, that's becomes another one of his weaknesses. But it's kind of fun watching this happen. I'll get to that. I have far more thoughts on Domitian on this. I'm blowing through the plot right now, just like a summary, an overview of the plot. The more interesting character is, I want to say Kala. Kala was her name, played by Sarah. Oh, I really wanted to learn her name because I thought she did a really good job. Sarah something. I would say, if I gave a trophy to best performance of the show, I really enjoyed Kala the most. She plays the mother to these three children who have all been captured and taken into slavery. I did have the question of, why isn't she taken into slavery? Like, what is it about her? You know what I'm saying? Like, why did people just kidnap her kids? I mean, like, usually when people took slaves, they just took them. And it's weird because she just kind of like walks about like she's free. But the others three were free too until they were just taken and not. It's very weird. And some of the stuff, it just didn't make sense to me. I was like, so Kala's just walking around, but like her three kids are slaves? I'm sure they look alike. I'm sure it's just like, who's this person? But yeah, and so she is driven to try to get money to buy her kids back. She has a line sort of at the beginning. She's like, slaves can be bought, but slaves can be sold. So I guess to her, buy her kids back. Anyway, you shouldn't have to buy something like that you already own. We should be sending different messages, but it works for her character. Plus, she's a badass that'll do just about damn near anything, and I love this performance. I loved Kala. She kind of drove the show for me. Her two daughters don't really do much. They kind of just float in and out when is needed. We spend a lot of time with her son Kwame, though, because he has been chosen to be a gladiator, and he has to fight and kill a lot of people. Has to fight a lot of people who are bigger than him and outsmart them, outwit them in the arena, so that hopefully one day he can earn his freedom by being given the wooden sword, by becoming popular enough that he finally he's earned his freedom. He's no longer a slave. You've seen Gladiator. Don't look at me like you haven't seen Gladiator. I'm not gonna say the show isn't like the most. It's historical, so it can't be that original. It's supposed to pull from history. So to its credit, there's only just so much that it originality it can bring to the table when it's trying to also be historically relevant. Uh, so that's kind of it. There's a lot of chariot races. There's sort of a main chariot person, Scorpius. I don't know if there's a U at the end of his name. I can't remember now. And he's sort of the celebrity in the chariot race scene, like the main chariot driver, who sort of has amassed some level of wealth for himself, but he still is not of the upper class. So there's that balance for him too. And there are other people who are not Titus and Domitius who are like moving about trying to get their certain levels of power. It's like power climbing is in this. It feels very much like Game of Thrones mixing in with, uh, Gladiator and then having a baby. And it's this, you know, it's it's a wide ensemble, a lot of characters, a lot of smaller characters that come in and out, a lot of different things happening with different sections. So you're jumping around and following a bunch of different plots at the same time. And I liked it. I thought the writing was strong. Some people bitched about it being weak. I liked it. I thought, is it predictable in so much that for the most part, I mean, I'm not I don't think that the ending is entirely predictable because I feel like the where the series goes at the end could have gone either way. I do feel that. I do feel like the show could have gone either way. And by the end of the season, it sets up a season two. So there you have to keep that in mind. Like for people who are like, oh well, you kind of know who lives and who dies. It's like it does kind of set up some people as being leads and other people as just sort of being like recurring supporting. So you need a certain amount of the leads to survive into the next season so that they can continue to carry their plots and stories. I don't know. I think some people are thinking about it as a mini series where it really doesn't matter and you can just murder everybody. But I felt like this was leaving it open for a renewal. Um, and when you think about it from that perspective, these stories are not finished. So when everybody's bitching online about how everything seems, they're like, well, I just understood. It's like, I don't know that you do because their stories are not really finished. If Those About to Die continues to have more seasons, then you haven't actually seen the end of a lot of these stories. You've seen part of these stories. So where do they go from here? And does it continue to be predictable? Um, so yeah, Anthony Hopkins is fine, but like I said, I just don't want they're really pushing the Anthony Hopkins thing um, a lot, and it's really not a thing. Uh, Sort of my before I dive into the audio description elements, I guess the one thing I want to talk about is Domitian because I'm also a gay film critic. I'm blind and gay, and I have to talk about two things. I'm concerned that the representation here is Domitian. I'm concerned that the one, well, technically not the one, but I would say the one series lead, because he does have to bed people. So, I guess there are other gay men, but the main gay character here is Domitian, and he is a sadistic nightmare of a human being. And I guess we can't all be good guys. I don't know. Is is that the takeaway? Not thrilled about the representation, but I I am I supposed to say that gay guys can't be villains in things? I wish he wasn't a sadistic asshole. I do. I've seen some clapback against this, and that's just my commentary. Is uh, I it does suck. It does. It really does. He is shitty representation for for the LGBT population. I mean, like this dude's not going to win LGBT awards at the end of the year. I just don't feel that coming for him. But Yeah, he's not that complex, and you never really feel like you're like, I really want Domitian to win, so that his view of Rome seems excellent. He seems like he'll be really good for the people. Um, so because of that, it's really hard to get behind him. I mean, he's a dick in pretty much any opportunity he has an opportunity to do it. He's just, and some of the stuff he does is just really sadistic. Even to people that he's like his ex lovers and stuff. There's one scene that's just like kind of horrifying. You're like, oh my god. So yeah, I'm not a fan of that, but he's just one part of a large. He's a cog in the wheel, one part of a larger thing, and the larger thing I enjoyed. I was engaged for 10 episodes in a show I had no idea what it was going into it. I was like, "There's a show called Those About to Die on Peacock. Oh, that would be fun. Oh, it is fun. Okay, cool, good to know." I had a good time with this. Audio description wise, so there's this world building that you have to do. Um, it's a sword and sandals epic, so we have to be brought into Rome. So we have to be kind of immersed in Rome, and I felt like the show did an okay job of that in immersing us, not just in what's happening, not just in context of the I don't know, like the fighting or the chariot racing or the sex or conversations, but actually like shaping Rome. Like what do things look like back then? Uh, what do these people's homes look like? What do their costumes look like? This dude went into like I heard the costume designer go into great detail about his stuff, and I was like, man, he and Peacock apparently specifically asked him to come up with a new look for the show, which I was like, and keep it that, but it's historical. Like I mean, it's togas and stuff. So he had to find a way to like somehow make it feel like that the costumes were unique to those about to die, while also still feeling like historically relevant, which I think is very nuanced because you can't just you can either just totally say screw it, throw it out the door, rewrite it, and do your own thing, or you just have to find little ways of adding flair to things, like a little embellishment here, a little embellishment there, a little piece of jewelry there, which seems to be more what he did. Um, but yeah, I kind of wish we'd gotten maybe a little bit more world building. But as far as tracking the characters, it's a very wide cast. These shows are really hard to follow. House of the Dragon is proving that because we have so many smaller and recurring characters that come in and out. I'm like, Jesus, I don't even remember who you are. Was I supposed to remember you? Like, I sometimes I get even confused. Like, have you been on camera before? Where were you before? Do I know you? Like, there's so many characters. And Those About to Die has a little bit less, but it still has a bunch of like recurring characters that float in and out. And you're like, who the fuck are you? I don't remember you. Like I was able to follow the leads because they were given the most amount of screen time. But there were like some other characters that were floating in and out that I was like, were you in an episode before? And that's the problem with being blind is the lack of facial recognition. And when I look at this cast of names, I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they look like. I need that too. I know what Anthony Hopkins looks like. I feel like most people do. I feel like if you're a blind person who watches film, you probably have a general idea of what Anthony Hopkins looks like. So, but everyone else, I don't think anybody knows what these people look like. And there's a clear, because we're incorporating slavery here, and also there was like a conquering of people. So there's this like queen and like her people. I do need to know what these people look like definitively. I would say racially slash ethnically. Like, what does this mean for the show? Did they, because we do have shows that are historical and take and embellish, with like Hamilton and Bridgerton type stuff where they intentionally try to do that. And we have shows that are like, no, this is how history was. So we need to specifically, these are where the black people are. These are where the brown people are, so where the white people are. This is what we're doing here. But I didn't really, that the description doesn't really do that either. So I have no idea if this was a Bridgerton type casting or traditional casting. I'm going with traditional in my head. Like I thought of it as traditional the whole time because of historical. I was trying to think about where these people were coming from, where they were taking them from, and trying to picture it that way. I don't know if that's fair, but I was kind of left a little out to dry on that. So, what does the audio description do well? Action scenes. The chariot races were engaging. The gladiator fights were amazing, and that's such a huge part of the show. Roland Emmerich is an action director first and foremost, and he directs those scenes better than any other scene in the show. I mean, the chariot races are fantastic. They are like a highlight of the show. I have no idea what they look like. Apparently awful. From every troll on the internet, awful would be the word. Just ass, trash, whatever word they can use. Maybe there is something to the fact that Viggo Mortensen's like, oh, film criticism is gone. It's like, that's not criticism. Those are just people who have IMDb accounts and Google reviews and stuff like that. Those are not actual people trying to like consistently review cinema on a large scale. Some of those people are just like, I hated this show. It's terrible. It's not a review. Anyway, yeah, it does that really well. The sex scenes are okay. I mean, they're not. Bridgerton sort of raised the bar in terms of what's possible, and there are other shows that have been successful too recently. I thought Sexy Beast had some really engaging scenes. This is what it is. It's fine. It's like House of the Dragon. It's like we have sex, and it's not just thrusting. We were trying to maybe go a little bit above thrusting. I hate thrusting so much. I hate when people just go they thrust, and I'm just like, oh my god, please use a different word. Can we find a different word? I've heard thrusting so much since going blind. It's just like I think I've heard it more since losing my vision than since ever before in my entire life. At like 34 years to hear the word thrust, and wasn't used that much. And then all of a sudden I go blind and everybody's thrusting all the time. And I'm just like, fuck. Anyway, this is an excellent sort of attempt at doing a sword and sandals TV show for Peacock is what this is. I was engaged. Halfway through, I named it a critic's pick because I was really engaged, because I actually paid attention. I was actually like into the episodes. I didn't like want to look at my phone. I didn't want to do anything else. I was actually like, wow, this is interesting to me. And that's the thing about it is, I know people don't want to give it like curve points. There's really nothing like this on the landscape right now. There's no sword and sandals show. They don't usually make this kind of thing. We usually stay away from this genre. It's different than House of the Dragon. It's also historically relevant instead of being like a fantasy show. So there are no dragons flying around in Rome. There are a lot of things here that I like about it and would like to see continue. I think Roland Emmerich, for the most part, does a decent job directing it. I thought it was well written. I liked the characters. I saw their plots and their stories. I think in season 2 we could definitely develop more of sort of the middle characters. Anybody who was sort of like a heavy recurring, I would say, should have more to do. I'd love to see more from the daughters. I kind of felt like they were mostly just damsels in distress for most of the season. I'd love to see them have more of a personality, and really kind of come into their own. I'd love to see them be more like Sansa and Arya, like that kind of reference. And those references are fair because this cast is assembled from people who have been in, an assembly of shows before. Most of these people, you would not recognize them based on their credits, but I mean, they have Game of Thrones, Ted Lasso, Foundation. I looked at the resumes. It's a bunch of shows that you've seen recently. Franklin. It's all stuff that has happened semi-recently. And as a result, I feel like, they're all TV actors. So let's make a good TV show. Try to make this the next Game of Thrones. And I think Roland Emmerich needs a lot of redemption. He needs to stop trying to have like the Earth have some sort of weird apocalypse from some event that he's created out of thin air. Some weird, the weather is attacking Earth. We have this weather satellite. Stop. I'm glad he's moved on from dumb ideas into shows that might have purpose. So in general, yeah, and I'd love to see Emmy consideration for this, but I have a feeling what's going to happen here is that if the VFX really are that bad, that's what's going to kill the show. So somebody like Sarah as Kala is just she's not gonna get the recognition for her performance that she deserves. I'm not even sure Anthony Hopkins could get a supporting, or if he's even considered supporting, he could be considered a guest. Honestly, it's pretty close to a guest performance. But yeah, I'm not even sure he can get a guest actor nomination next year at the Emmys for this. So even though most people are like, Anthony Hopkins was good and the rest of the series was terrible. So I like it. I'm bucking the trend. And so if you're blind, maybe you'll love it. I think it's well written. I think the action scenes were engaging. It could do some more on world building and character shaping, but that's something that the ship has sailed. I like William Michael Redmond's voice on this. I think he's interesting. I don't necessarily need him on this, but he's great in the action sequences. William Michael Redmond is somebody who enhances action and horror very well. So for the scenes like chariot races and gladiator fights, he sounds excellent. For some of the other stuff where it's like quieter moments, his voice is still like ready for like a jump scare. It just is. I don't know. For some things he's like my number one choice, and for some other things he's like, well, it's nice because I like him as a narrator. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag having him here, because some of the stuff I thought, well, it's great to have his voice here because he really makes it sound exciting. And then the whole thing isn't just chariot races and gladiator fights. So, but there is a lot of horrifying stuff that happens outside of the arena, mostly because of the mission. So, it happens. I'm leaning positive on this. I really liked Those About to Die. I'm not even leaning positive. I'm full positive on this. I like Those About to Die. It's set up as season 2. I don't know if it's going to come. I don't know what the budget is on this show. Twisted Metal got a second season, despite the fact that a lot of people were hating on its VFX. So it really just depends on who watches this and if enough people watch it. It's got like a 6 point something right now on IMDb, which is not terrible. That's pretty average for IMDb. And it could survive with a 6 point something. It doesn't need to go higher than that. So if it keeps dipping below it, Peacock may look at it. It's one of the reasons I don't think The Acolyte is going to get a second season. It has like a 3 on IMDb. It's just really hard. It's really hard to convince Disney that there's an audience for season 2 of The Acolyte that's worth spending the money on it instead of spending the money on something else. But I recommend this, especially if you are blind and can't see the visual effects. Maybe that's the fix. If you're sighted and you're not really digging the VFX, close your eyes, turn on the audio description, and let William Michael Redmond let him describe it for you. It'll bother you a lot less. Anyway, I'm gonna give those about to cry. I'm gonna give it an A-. I actually really did like the show. It's got a couple little nitpicky things here and there, but I binge watched a 10 episode, like 10 hours in just a couple days, and I was fully engaged in every single episode. It's really hard for me to ignore that. It's really hard for me to turn around and be like, well, let me tell you that I'm gonna put on my film snob now. It's like, I was really engaged in this. Maybe I'm just starved for this kind of thing. That's totally viable and totally possible, but good for Peacock for noticing and being like, hey, you know what no one has right now? This kind of thing. Because they could have just made like another cop procedural. Law and Order, Las Vegas. Coming to Peacock. Chicago sewer systems coming to Peacock. It's like, I mean, they could have done so many other shows that they have part of their branding, the Real Housewives of wherever, but instead they made this, and I think it's satisfying a need that hasn't been satisfied, and cool, let's do it. It's like the Viking show, right? Like everybody loves the Viking show because there was no other Viking show. Like who else made a Viking show? So at the time it hit, it was like, yeah, well, Vikings, this is a great idea for a TV show. It is. It's a great idea to have a gladiator show right now. So yeah, maybe that's what it is. I don't know, but I'm gonna stand by that A minus. I liked it, and I think some other people will too, but a lot of people haven't. So I'm perfectly fine standing on my own on this one. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.